Hey guys, Ken here from Pop Culture Junkies. It's Wednesday, you know what that means. New comics. My first pick this week is Batman Catwoman. This is issue 6 of Tom King's limited Black Label series. It's a great story. It does jump timelines, which is interesting. It goes from the future where Batman's no longer around for whatever reason to a past where he was, and really it's a story about Catwoman so far. I think it's a great story for Tom King. He does well in a more confined space. The longer he seems to go on a series, the more it kind of gets drawn out and it starts to just kind of trail off into something you feel like should have been done a while ago. It's similar to Tenet, if you watched it, where by the time it's getting to the third act, you thought you were at the finale and you realize there's another 40 minutes of movie. That's what happens with Tom King runs on comics a lot of times. So I think this one will be great, well contained. My next pick this week is Marauders. This is probably the best X book since the reboot. The main X title was probably the best for a bit, but really the Marauders is a great series. It's a lot of Kitty Pryde and kind of a Black Ops team, very similar to X-Force in what they go out and do. Moon Knight's my next pick, A1 for this Momoko cover. This is a gorgeous Momoko cover. This is actually different from the trading card. If you look at the trading card set from a lot of the other Momoko covers, for Moon Knight they use different art. It's new art for her for this cover. Beside that point, it's also a really great story so far. Number 2 did not let up. It doesn't disappoint. It is just as good as issue 1. I love Moon Knight. Mark Spector, when he's in a suit and tie, is a great balance between the ultra violence of the character, the civilized look, and the, when he cracks his knuckles, things are going to happen. It's one of my favorite books so far. Again, it's on issue 2, so it's easy to say that. A lot of books start out great and then they taper off. So far, this one has been well worth it. For this next one, I'm going to cheat a little bit because all of the Star Wars books right now are part of a huge crossover that's been going on for a couple months. So I have both Star Wars and War of the Bounty Hunters. Typically these huge crossovers, they're either really great or really terrible. Luckily, War of the Bounty Hunters has been pretty good so far. This tells the story between when Han Solo is encased in carbonite and when he winds up at Jabba the Hutt's. So far, I've really enjoyed it. Kira does make an appearance. I think it was her first appearance in comics when she did show up a few issues ago. The one problem with this story is it's one of those stories where you know how it ends, and so it can be hard to get invested in a lot of it because you know what's going to happen. I know that Darth Vader's not going to kill Boba Fett if they fight. It's just not possible. I know that nothing is going to happen with Luke and Vader in this story because there's a whole story still to come. That's the one issue with it, but so far I have enjoyed it. It's been worth staying on all of the Star Wars books to see how this crossover completes. Next up is a book I forgot to talk about, I think, when it came out, and that's Superman and the Authority. So I'm going to cheat because number 2 came out this week, as you can see here. Really impressed with what Morrison's doing here. Feels a lot like Tom Strong in the Authority. The one thing about this book, Morrison, for me, is similar to Tom King in a way. Morrison can get really out there and he can jump to a lot of places without telling the story in between. Whether he just assumes you get it, he doesn't always tell it. And so I think in a 4-issue mini, it's really contained him, and that restriction has really made him more creative than he typically is. I think X-Men's a great example where it started off great and then it just went all over the place in his run. I think this 4-issue mini is going to be really fantastic. Manchester Black and Superman's interactions so far have been great. Really interested to see how this finishes out and if there's more in the future of these characters in this universe. Sisters of Battle is my next pick. It is the next Warhammer miniseries from Marvel. Their first one, the Marnius Calgar miniseries, was a great introduction to the 40k universe. If you are not familiar with 40k, it is more extreme and more violent than any other property that you're a fan of. I want to see how it continues through Sisters of Battle. I have faith in them after reading this issue, and I want to see the next introduction into the 40K universe from Marvel. I think the future of the property in Marvel's hands is going to be good. I was a little worried when they picked it up if it would feel true to 40K. It does so far, which is a great sign. Probably the biggest, most hyped Marvel book this week, The Trial of Magneto. On just the first step, it's got both a Momoko and an art germ cover. There's actually a virgin variant of this art germ cover. I was really close to picking it up today. There is not one for the Momoko, which is unfortunate. However, it's a great white background cover of Momoko art. This is the big story about the murder of the Scarlet Witch. This will really define the X books for a little while to come. We know Inferno is going to happen next. That's going to be the next big crossover. Interestingly, with Marvel right now, Hickman had a second act that he had planned for the entire X-Book line. However, all the writers really wanted to continue with the Krakoa first act. So Hickman's going to step away and do some other things while the current writers continue writing in that phase. And then Hickman will come back in the future and move into that second act, hopefully. Hopefully this isn't one of the X-Men acts that just kind of drags on and things are left unresolved that were started way before. We're still waiting to see what happened from that Warlock spoiler in House of X, Powers of X, right? Nothing has been done about that yet. So it'll be interesting to see the future of the X books. I'm a little wary. I dropped a lot of them recently. The main X book has been faltering somewhat. We'll see what happens with the Trial and Inferno. I may jump back on all of them just for the crossover. I may not. I may see how these next few issues go. Gonna kind of cheat again, similar to Superman and the Authority. This is Beyond the Breach. Issue 1 came out about a month ago, just like Superman and the Authority. Issue 2 came out this week, just like Superman and the Authority, so I did want to talk about them both. Beyond the Breach is an independent from Aftershock. It tells a story so far in issue 1 of essentially a girl driving down the highway who goes through a portal into another place with fantastic monsters, and now she's stuck there. I don't know what's going to happen so far. I'm not even sure how else to explain what's happening in this book, but I do really like it. It's a lot of that otherworldly, Lovecraftian space horror going on so far. Anyway, you should pick it up. Issue 1 or 2 are out now. I'm not sure if this is actually an ongoing or a limited, but either way, I think it's worth the wait. I think it's worth the time. You should definitely check it out. Last on the list is Eat the Rich. This is one of the most hyped books that I've heard about this week. I picked it up because I wasn't planning on picking it up actually. When I saw it in person and flipped through it, it changed my mind somewhat. I also picked it up for the Frism cover. A little bit different than the hard lines she usually uses. Still a really great cover. The story is essentially a woman traveling with her fiance to meet his rich family, and then things kind of take a turn. As you can tell with the title Eat the Rich, it is somewhat literal. So it is one of those stories where you can tell that it's dragging on before it leaves you on a cliffhanger ending. I will say that the drag to get there is not as boring as a lot of other stories. It's still somewhat annoying when you know you're just kind of flipping through and taking time on words just to get to the last page for this cliffhanger that they're going to try to sell you the rest of the series on. It does lay some good groundwork for the future. However, again, you can feel it happening as you're reading the book. You never at any point think anything's really going to drastically change in the story until the last page of it. Hopefully that's an issue 1 thing and not a series thing. That's the kind of thing I would quit buying a book for. If you can get your hands on it, check it out. Support your local comic shops. Those are the books I suggest you read this week.